folks, welcome to northern Minnesota. It's the beginning of June and we're in a transition period where these fish are going to be moving on to more of a bug hatch bite. So leeches will probably start to be what you want to be throwing at these fish over the next week or two, and the minnow jig bite's going to get a little bit more difficult. But we did notice yesterday that some of the fish were puking up bugs when they were coming up to the surface. But we're going to see if we can still get a couple more days out of jigging. And I want to show you guys a technique today that should help you put a little bit more fish in the boat, just by creating a jigging cadence that really doesn't let that jig sit on the bottom very long. These fish don't need a lot of time to look at the jig, and most of the time they're hitting it on the fall. So we're going to show you how to do this and hopefully put a couple fish in the boat. There we go. Always work these all the way back to the boat, because a lot of the time, once you start doing that vertical hop is when they're actually going to eat it. What we're doing is we're pitching away from the boat and we're letting our line fall all the way to the bottom before we close our bail. And you'll see it stop. That's where I'm going to reel up this little bit of slack. I'm just going to give it a pop and hold my rod high. And you'll see it give slack again when the jig gets back to the bottom, and I'm going to give it another pop right away. The fish have been transitioning over into feeding on bugs, so I really don't want to give them a ton of time to look at this bait on the bottom. Most of the time they're hitting it right on that fall. And so you want to, as soon as it gets to the bottom, you want to pop it again and give them that chance. And by holding your rod up high, a lot of times you're going to feel that little tick when these fish are eating. It's a nice walleye. And what we're doing is we're just working this outside break line down the shoreline, pitching jigs away from the boat. We have no wind today. And so when you don't have wind, one of the big keys to catching walleyes is to make sure you're away from the boat. They don't like boats, especially boats with their motors on. People driving by, nice little eater, but we're gonna let that one go. And a lot of times they'll follow it back to your boat if you haven't driven over them, and they'll eat it on that vertical jig. So you always want to work your jig back to the boat. But when these fish are in a transition mode, you really want to keep that jig moving. It's going to help you put a lot more fish in the boat. There he is. Followed it back, ate about 20 feet out. You can see on the water there's bug carcasses everywhere. There's mayflies are showing up. We got fish flies all over the place. But you still can get a couple to eat this jig and minnow bite, even when it's calm out. Nice healthy fish. Probably 17, 18. I'm gonna keep this minnow. He's a little bit bigger. I'm not gonna keep this minnow. His head fell off. There he is. 2 casts in a row. That one ate right under the boat. Just did a short little hop under the boat. Give it one more chance and it took it. Now I'm using a braided line. It's actually a solid line called Nanofill. And I believe that it helps me cast better. It also lets me feel these fish bite just a little bit better. But then I've got about a 7 to 10 foot leader of fluorocarbon, and it's dead calm out here. There's no wind, and I'm on a pretty clear lake, and I'm using 12-pound test line. So I switched over to 12-pound fluoro about 3 years ago, and I really haven't noticed a big difference in not being able to catch these fish. And I get a little bit better abrasion resistance when I'm fishing in areas that have a lot more northerns. Couple short hops right when you get it back to the boat. A lot of times a little bit of change in jigging cadence will be the difference in getting them to eat. This same method of doing these pops and letting it fall works great if you're drifting in wind or casting in wind as well. It's just creating that rhythm to it's almost like that cat and mouse game where the walleyes will be following it and they'll get just close enough and you pop it again in their face and eventually they're going to come up and just eat it. There it was. Very light bites, but every single one is hitting on that fall. A lot of people will see a day like today with no wind, no clouds, and they just won't walleye fish because wind and clouds is your ticket to success. And if you can just keep working that jig away from the boat and not drive over the areas of where the fish are, you're gonna have a lot more success. This is one of my favorite ways of catching walleyes, is pitching jigs. And they will eat on days like today. You got to work through them, but you can put a bunch of fish in the boat. He is right under the boat. So I'm marking lots of fish and side imaging in this area. Seeing them on Garmin. And they are not being very aggressive. So I'm going to catch one more fish for you today. And we're going to switch over to a bobber and leech just to show you. If you know there's fish down there and they're struggling to eat, if you can switch over to a different presentation and still get it away from the boat versus trolling over them with like a Lindy rig or a spinner, you can still have that same success. We're gonna put on a bobber quick, pitch it out away from the boat, and truly see if they're starting to key on those bugs more versus this jig and minnow bite. They might be turning on here. That's 2 casts in a row. I've had a fish. This one feels a little bit nicer. I did throw a bobber at them with a leech. They didn't want nothing to do with it. But do walleyes bite better when it is windy? They absolutely do. But you can come out here on a summer calm day, as long as you fish away from the boat, you can put a limit of walleyes in the live well if that's what you want to do.